When the Japanese invaded less than a year later, the men of the small Lark Force garrison faced overwhelming odds. They were never in a position to properly defend Rabaul or even to repel an attack. And most of the 1,400 Australian troops, including 6 army nurses, were captured. Approximately 400 of the troops escaped to the mainland and another 160, or as we know, massacred at a toll plantation. Then about 1,050 of the captured Lark forces, while being shipped to Japan on the Montevideo Maru, were killed as their ship was sunk by an American submarine, the greatest single maritime tragedy in Australia's history. By February 1942, the Japanese had also invaded Ambon in the then Dutch East Indies, where Gull Force had been sent to support the Dutch troops. And despite instances of brave and determined resistance, there were just too few to hold back the 20,000 Japanese invaders, and more than 1,000 members of Gull Force were forced to surrender. These prisoners were then subjected to some of the most brutal treatment experienced by POWs anywhere during World War II. Starvation and brutality prevailed, and more than 3/4 of the Australian prisoners died in captivity, the highest death rate of any Australian prisoner of war. They died by execution, disease and starvation. Some died in Allied raids, or were denied precious Red Cross food and medicine. The story of Gull and Lark Forces is also one of family and friends. 70 years has passed since so many people waved goodbye to their sons, brothers, sisters, fathers and sweethearts. These people endured many long and painful years waiting for news of their loved ones. And when that news came, it was often tragic. No Australian family suffered more in wartime than the Hutchins family near Swan Hill. 7 sons went to war, only 3 returned. 4 brothers, Alan, Eric, David and Fred, died in Japanese POW camps. Eric, Fred and David were in Gull Force captured on Ambon, while Alan was captured with Lark Force at the border. Their brother Max Gilbert served with them on Ambon Island, and Max was one of only 126 Australian prisoners of war who were to return home after Gull Force's 1,200 men. I understand Max is with us today, one of his brothers, and all their comrades perished with him. Like Max and the members of the bird forces gathered here today, the government in Victoria is committed to honouring the stories of our veterans. And over the last few years, we have developed a very active program of commemoration of veterans' service and sacrifice. It's a program that includes the Restoring War Memorials Grant Program, the Digital Histories Program, the Remember Them publication, and the Premier's Spirit of Anzac Prize. We undertake these activities for one simple reason. It's not because anything we can do today will lessen the burden that fell upon those brave young men and women who were sent to the islands. It's not because anything we do today can ease the indescribable brutality and suffering that so many of them experienced. It's not because anything we do today can restore to them an ability that their hopes and dreams of having a long and fulfilling life could ever be realised. No, the simple reason is this. 7 decades on, there is only one thing we can do, and that is to remember. To remember the courage and conviction of so many young Victorians who risked for just cause. To remember their sacrifice was made in the protection of their nation. And to remember that if it had not been their selflessness, Australia and its people may not have been able to enjoy the freedom we have enjoyed ever since, and often take for granted. That is why commemorations like this are so vital, and it's important I conclude my contribution with the words of Les.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, a little change to the order of speakers. I'm going to ask Max, Eddie and Gilbert to step forward and say whatever he'd like to say. It's a Veterans Day, so Eddie, would you care to step forward, please? Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you for having me here. It's quite an occasion. I must confess that I have very few recollections of what happened 70 years ago. And I guess you'll be rather relieved to hear that, because it means I won't be speaking for very long. But this sounds strange perhaps, but on the day we moved out from Trawool, well, I learned this a few days later, I learned that you can never believe everything you read in the newspaper. Why do I say that? Well, there was a photo in the paper the next day, popular paper of the day, showing us marching out of our camp at Trawool. And the caption read, "Here's the 2nd 21st Battalion leaving their camp at Puckapunyal." Yes, I kid you not. Anyway, it was such an occasion. It's one that I hope that I remember. It was something to be part of this quite novel event, really, this march. But there were one of the very few things that I do recall about it were the wonderful receptions that we got at places where we had to stay the night. Benalla, I think, Violet Town, Euroa, and particularly Benalla. And I don't say that simply because I'm a guest of you people at Benalla here, but it was at Benalla where a wonderful concert was put on for us after we had marched through the town, showing how good we were marching behind our wonderful band. And I know the 2nd 22nd had a wonderful band too. I always reckon we had the best one. But there you are. So that concert is something that really is in my mind as being an event that stood out in that long march. And of course we still had to go to Wangaratta, and if my recollection is right, it was at Wanganailla we waited for a day for the 2nd 22nd to join us, and we welcomed them there. But then again, after that rest, we set off ahead of them across country to Beechworth and so on, till we ended up in Bonegilla. Now, I do want to share this with you. My father, who was in World War I in France, quite a thin, skinny sort of bloke you might say, and I was very much a chip of the old block, very skinny. When he heard that his son was going to take part in this march, this long march, he really feared for him. And he did even suggest that I should consider transferring to an artillery unit. Well, happy to say, of course, I proved him wrong. Because not only did I complete that march with all the other blokes, everything in between, and of course, came home from Melbourne. It's lovely to be with you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to say these few words, and I'm looking forward very much to meeting up with some fellas from the 2nd 22nd.
What an amazingly youthful young man. Well done, Ben. Salvation Army, your turn again for a couple of numbers. Thank you.
quartet, one cornet on baritone bass. Would be the one horn. It's a second verse, cornet on baritone bass. Here we go. After two. 1, 2.
Salvos. There at the front line when really needed during armed conflict and still here at the front line today. Thank you very much, Salvos. You're a wonderful group of people. Now I'm going to ask Norm Furness to speak. Norm just ran out of puff coming along that stretch up the road there, so I think Max, the Gull Force, have got one on the Lark Force, but maybe now Norm's going to bounce back. So Norm, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, firstly I'd like to thank Bill Sykes and his group for organising this very special day. Yes, it is 70 years ago since we marched into this town and stayed the night here on that famous route march from Trawool up to Bonegilla. I always remember when I first went into the army, I met an old soldier there, an old sergeant he was from the First World War, and I said to him, what's the qualifications for getting into the infantry? And he looked at me and he said, you passed them, son. I said, yes, but what are they? He said, well, you've got to have two things. And he said, you all got them both. And I said, well, what are they? He said, well, you've got to have a broad back and a weak mind. And he said, you passed both of them. And how right he was. I remember the march very well because I was 18 at the time. I just turned 18. And I was a city boy. I never